The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are back after a few days off. We'll be talking about what we were doing over the last few days coming up tomorrow morning on another edition of the Nerdcast News Report. But for tonight, as always, it is time for the Hard Rock Empire, episode number 61 of that podcast, episode number 157 of the Nerdcast Empire overall. And tonight we're going to be talking the best rock and metal for March the 28th, and it was a really strong week in music. Really excited to bring you some great albums this week. We'll talk news headlines. Of course, we'll get into the vault as well, and then, of course, we'll wrap things up with the Power Trio. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Yeah, there was a lot of really good music this week. I kind of wish that the powers that be would somehow find a way to better disperse that over a month's time so it's a little more evenly distributed. But can't complain when there's good music, and I think the picks we made were certainly very strong.
Yeah, it's one of those weeks where we probably could have each picked 4 bands and 4 albums each, and we'll probably, wish that, like Mike said, they were spaced out a little more in a couple of weeks when we'll have a week maybe where we don't have as strong of a selection. We don't know. Obviously, we take these a week at a time, but this was a very strong week. And, of course, when we get to the new music, I'll post the playlist that Mike puts together in the chat on both YouTube and Twitch, which, of course, is where you can catch us live every Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And I encourage you to go through it because I think you're going to find a lot of really great stuff that's stuff other than the 4 that we're going to talk about. But I think it's a really, really strong week for music. We're going to get to some news headlines right out of the gate, and we certainly weren't going to pass up the opportunity to talk about this news headline because it is certainly 2 bands that we talk about on this podcast quite a bit, and they are going to be coming on tour, which is certainly very exciting. The news announced late last week, the Symphony X and Sonata Arctica are going to be touring together in North America coming up starting in September. We've got our tickets already for the show that's going to be coming in Cleveland. Not real close for us, but not so far away that it's certainly not worth the 3.5-hour drive. Basically right up on the lake, which is right kind of in the area where this venue is located. But obviously, 2 bands that have been heavily featured over the previous 60 episodes of the Hard Rock Empire, especially Sonata Arctica, but Symphony X, obviously, an amazing band. They will be headlining the show. The tour starts in Pennsylvania on September the 4th in Stroudsburg, and it will wrap up at the end of September, right, in the 29th in Red Bank, New Jersey at the Vogel. The date we're going to see is the next to last date on the tour, the 27th at the Globe Iron in Cleveland. These guys they're not wasting a lot of time. They're getting a lot of dates in 1 month and basically going coast to coast and even into Canada just a little bit. But I'm really excited to get a chance to see these 2. I've seen Sonata Arctica. I've not seen Symphony X, but I'm super excited for this concert.
Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen Sonata Arctica a couple times, which is even better. But, yeah, this tour is pretty wild. You look at some of these stretches where there's really not – I mean, they go like a full week of no days off, basically. They have – like here, 9/10 through 9/14, boom, back to back to back to back. Then another stretch there from, let's see, the 23rd through the 27th. Like, man, that's got to be grueling, but really cool, and definitely cool to see them hit some cities that maybe don't always get a chance to see bands like this very often. Yeah, it's going to be cool. I know Symphony X is looking to potentially have their new album written by the end of this year and released by next year, which would be really awesome. And Sonata Arctica's touring still in support of 2024's Clear Cold Beyond, which was a really good album. Standout tracks on it like First in Line, Dark Empath, Angel Defiled. If you like metal and you haven't watched either of these bands live, take the time to do it because they don't tour over here every day, and they always put on a great show.
Yeah, and, we've seen Sonata Arctica together on several occasions. I think at least 3 times we've seen them live, and every time we've seen them, it's been kind of in front of a mediocre-sized crowd, and it's really a shame. Twice in Louisville, I think we saw them in Columbus as well. And, it would be great to see fans that, love this kind of music really come out and support these acts. Obviously, there are big cities, as we mentioned. You mentioned a few of them: Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego on the West Coast. You're getting Vancouver and Calgary, Edmonton, all the big kind of starting on the West Coast of Canada, moving to the Prairie provinces into Winnipeg, and then Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Joliet. So you got a Chicago area one, and then Cleveland, and before you finish up in New Jersey. But yeah, there are a lot of venues. Now, obviously, they're not hitting the South. There are certain parts they're not hitting. But if you are in areas that are within 4 or 5 hour drive of one of these venues, I definitely encourage you to get a chance to see this live, because again, the more you support it, the more they're going to come over, and the more they come over, the better chance they might come a little closer to where you're located, and maybe it won't be quite as bad a drive next time.
Yeah, I would really love to see bands like these show up on some of the bigger festivals. I mean, we have Sonic Temple coming up in about a month, and I would love to see more symphonic or power metal be represented in that festival, which seems to be sorely lacking it. But yeah, I always jump at the chance at seeing either of these bands live.
Yeah, really excited to see this coming up in September. And again, we put the link in the chat on both chats, and you can definitely find out information on tickets. I think I would assume, since the Cleveland date's already gone on sale, that all of these tickets are now on sale for this tour. So if not, they will certainly be going on sale very, very soon. Get your tickets now and certainly support these bands as they're touring coming up in the month of September. Another band that we talk about a lot on this podcast was certainly news that I wanted to kind of put out there, is the news that Helloween has announced their new album officially, called Giants and Monsters. We now know when that is going to be coming out. It will be August the 29th via our friends at Reigning Phoenix Music. Almost certainly we'll be talking about it on the podcast sometime in September, but we definitely wanted to talk a little bit about it because obviously, Helloween has reunited in just this massive talent of music that it spans pretty much every iteration of the band through their history. And it's wild to see them putting out new music because one article I read on it, just you have so many people to have input from, so many singers that you're trying to make sure everybody kind of gets a balance. So I'm really excited to see what this sounds like. But I know one thing's for sure, it's going to be really awesome, and I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah, definitely something else I'm looking forward to. In the article, they mentioned some remarks that Andy Darris made regarding the album, saying it's an easier listen than their last release, which was kind of the first one they all did as the giant super group of Helloween that we see now. He said things feel like they're flowing a lot more and they're less kind of constructed. He also mentioned it being a happy Helloween album, which he believes is kind of the best version of Helloween. So I can't really argue. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really great power metal with great vocals between he and Michael Kiske. It's going to be awesome, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and you get the vibe when you read the comments on this article, and then there was another Blabbermouth article that kind of talked a little bit more about the article or the album. It just seems like the band's in a really good place right now, that it would be very easy. This is, like you said, the second album with this mega group that they have now formed. It would be easy that, okay, now maybe the honeymoons wore off. Now we're starting to get some infighting, but you just don't get the vibe that any of that's happening, that these guys are still really happy to play together. They know that, they're certainly toward the back end of their career, and they kind of want to enjoy this opportunity to not only make music, but go on tour supporting it for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, I feel like at this stage in their career, they're all kind of made individuals, so there may not be the same kind of pressure they felt creatively, where if one person maybe is veering off in a different direction, hey, we can't work with that guy anymore because he seems to have slipped off the metal wagon. But I think they're just kind of happy where they are, and they can do whatever they want, and to some degree, people are going to eat it up because they're legends.
Slipped off the metal wagon sounds like an album title for one of the bands that we review each and every week. I'd be shocked if somebody wants to take that. Feel free, just you can cut us a check or something. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for this, and they're another one of those groups I've not had the chance to see live, but I would love that opportunity if it ever comes about. Just really, really talented, and again, just somehow firing on all cylinders after bringing everybody together, and excited for this new album. Again, going to be coming out August the 29th. And yeah, like I said, you can bet we're going to be talking about it when September rolls around. One final news story, and again, sometimes I just like to find news stories that have interesting headlines, and to me, this was kind of funny. So and obviously we know our buddy Chris is a fan of Pantera, has been a fan of Pantera. So this headline kind of cracked me up, and it was kind of interesting to read about it. It was basically talking about It was an article with an interview with Rex Brown talking about the early years of Pantera and talking about how the Abbott brothers in their early days in the early 80s were playing songs that sounded like Loverboy, basically. That is where they started out. And then when Ride the Lightning came out, it basically changed their whole mindset on what music was going to sound like, and began to influence what they were going to be. But it's an interesting thought to think that maybe Pantera could have been a glam band in the 80s instead.
And they were. I mean, that's their first 3 albums are so different than what we ended up with as what we know as Pantera. And like days before the internet, like there were a lot of people that wouldn't have really known about the old Pantera because they did everything they could to kind of disavow that period in time. If you were to ask somebody what was their first album, people would tell you Cowboys from Hell because they didn't want to admit to the existence of metal magic, Projects in the Jungle, I Am the Night, Power Metal. Power Metal being the first with Phil Anselmo, but even then they're still very much glammed out. Like they look like a hair band that's trying to become more edgy, and to some degree, I guess they kind of were. But you look at their early work, and it's like, the members of the band. You have Terry Glaze was the singer. You had Diamond Darrell.
Yeah,
like he wasn't even Dimebag yet. He was Diamond Darrell. Yeah. Rex Brown was Rex Rocker. Like, cool name, man. And Vinnie Paul was still Vinnie Paul, but. Yeah, it's not really surprising because it's been pretty well known that Darrell was a huge Eddie Van Halen fan, and that style of music was very influential on the guys. And so I'm certainly not surprised that they had those interests. Some of the other parts of the article were interesting, just to think that like they all kind of grew up together. The main, original 4 of them, 3 of them if you then count Phil Anselmo jumping in, but to think that Rex Brown was in the same jazz band in high school as the other members. You're just like, I don't think of Pantera as dudes that were like chilling out in jazz band.
Yeah.
That's really bizarre to me, but cool. And I'm sure they weren't the only band that when that thrash metal really started heating up after kind of the initial Metallica album, you then get into Ride the Lightning, which was so much more polished than the first album. I'm sure that influenced a lot of people from there. And, obviously Darrell had the guitar chops where he could play about anything. So you kind of knew what was hot. They just happened to get the right singer that could pull off a much more aggressive style of vocals too. And the rest is history. But yeah, it's always cool to get a different perspective. And I feel like you don't always hear a lot from Rex Brown, but it also kind of reframes the thought of Pantera continuing when you think, he was there the whole time too. It's like, I know he isn't one of the brothers, but ultimately you have Phil, who is the classic lead singer of the band. You have the bassist. Who are we to say that they shouldn't keep going on under the Pantera name? People know that the brothers have passed away. It's not like you're tricking anybody.
Right.
But yeah, a really cool story and definitely we're so hung up in kind of the drama of the past, we don't really get to celebrate kind of the early days and these guys coming up and becoming the huge band that they became in the 90s.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder if, what if they hadn't changed their influences? What would their career have looked like going into the late 80s if they would have been continuing to play and maybe evolve that type of music to a different way?
Yeah.
Like, are they doing tours with Van Hagar basically at that time, where they're just playing this kind of stadium rock that was really popular in the late 80s. Like, it's really interesting to think about. And again, the jazz angle was very fascinating, but again, not surprising because a lot of times these musically talented guys, like, they get into different types of music, and jazz band might have been the only option they had in school, and it was a chance for them to basically learn the musicianship part of it, and again, kind of set them up to be able to play whatever they wanted to play once they got to the rock and roll side.
Yeah, I want to say the article, he even mentioned that by like his senior year, he was only taking music classes. Like, that's all he was doing. So not surprising that he has this wealth of diverse musical knowledge, but you don't really think about it when you listen to Pantera, despite kind of how he reiterates in the article that they had a very keen pop sensibility to them. Like, even some of the more aggressive songs still had a poppiness there. And that's probably why they resonated with so many people.
I mean, again, if you want to be commercially successful, there's a formula in pop music that works. And just because the music doesn't sound like pop music, if you can have the general concept of what that formula is, you can have success with really any kind of music. We've seen, as much as I'm not a fan of country music in the modern day, that's exactly what they did. They basically took the pop formula and moved it over to country, and
became kind of hillbilly pop music, basically.
Yeah, basically. So, just a cool story again. Classic band, obviously, and certainly some interesting influences for what was obviously very and still very talented for the guys that are still at it as well. So, just an interesting story about Pantera. We're going to get to the new music in a moment. A reminder, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our store, which is still there, still running. We've got a lot of really good stuff there. A reminder, we'll be back with you in a little over 12 hours time, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time or thereabouts. I never know because of my work schedule, but usually it's going to be right at 8:30 a.m. on Mondays. We're going to be talking all things SakaiCon. We just got back from Newark, Ohio today, and they have run their first convention, and we will give you all of our thoughts on what this kind of brand new spin-off convention from OhioCon looks like and overall what the weekend felt like. So we'll talk all about that tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And then our next podcast will be coming up on Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. It'll be another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. It'll be all things WrestleMania. We'll have our official WrestleMania preview coming up next Saturday, so look forward to that. And then sometime next weekend, not sure exactly what time it's going to be yet, we will have another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. It'll be the music from April something. The first week in April. April 4th. So don't know what time. It will not be at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be in the midst of watching WrestleMania at that point. It will probably be earlier on Sunday, but check your local listings. We'll squeeze it in there somewhere, but looking forward to the music. That'll be coming up next week. Time to get to the new music. And, of course, it means that it's time for me as I start rambling through my spiel to paste Mike's playlist in the chat as we do each and every week. Of course, we go through each and every week. Mike goes through and pulls a list of all the new album releases for a given date. That given date in question this time is March the 28th, and then he will pull a new track off of each of those albums and put them on a playlist, which I have just now posted in the chat on both Twitch and YouTube. And then we go through and we try to find a couple of new releases that we'd like to spotlight on this podcast. This was a week where, again, we really could have picked way beyond two each. And I know there were a couple of major acts, I think, that had album releases this week, or certainly more major acts. I can't remember off the top of my head. I didn't have
Arch Enemy had a new album.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. Did I flag them like I wanted to? Ministry had a new one.
Yeah.
The Darkness.
Yeah, The Darkness.
Always classic. Definitely a few major acts with new albums. We obviously try to steer clear of those, so they're not amongst the picks, but still, if you're a fan, definitely worth checking out all that.
Yeah, and again, a lot of other really good stuff. So I encourage you to check out the playlist. In addition to the major acts Mike mentioned, there were some other maybe smaller acts that had really good albums this week as well. Very strong week. It was a lot of fun getting through the music. But in the end, there can only be two of us, two albums each.
Highlander works.
It's a different version of Highlander for sure. At the end of the day, we will only have two picks each, and we will tell you what those picks are coming up in this segment. One final reminder, if you're listening on the podcast network, you will not get to hear the audio clips. If you're on YouTube or Twitch watching on the VOD right now, maybe you will, maybe you won't. Best place to hear them is to join us at 7 o'clock Eastern time every Sunday night here on Twitch and on YouTube. And with that said, my spiel is over. It's time to get to the new music from March the 28th. Mike, you're going to kick us off. As always, what do you have for your first pick this week?
Yeah, so when I'm pulling the tracks for the playlist, I basically have this spreadsheet, and I'm copying and pasting the bands and the album names and pulling them up that way. And my first impression is usually created by, well, kind of two things. The names, obviously, and then whatever the video I pull up, if it's the album artwork, that has some sort of impression on me, and we kind of go from there. My first pick, the second I saw it, I thought, okay, this is obviously something kind of retro-inspired. This is probably going to be up my alley. And yeah, it absolutely was. My first pick is the debut album from a progressive power metal band from Italy. The band is Vigilhunter, and this is their self-titled debut, Vigilhunter.
Yeah, again, sometimes you just see the art and you just know, like, there's just no way this can be bad. Like, this has to be good. And it, again, so every once in a while we'll get surprised. This was not a surprise. The album art was really cool, and the music was cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a band that formed in 2024. Consists of Mirko Negrino on bass, Marcelo Leocani on drums, Mattia Itala on guitars, and Alex Pazna on vocals and guitars. I didn't notice, but Alex is actually also the lead singer of the band Hitten, who had an album late in 2023 that I kind of recall, despite it predating our weekly music show back then. The first tag they use on their Bandcamp is 80s metal. And I think that kind of fits them. The guitar tones kind of have that throwback sound to them, and Alex's vocals feel like they could be an early 80s contemporary of a band like Queensryche. Like, just has that feel to it. The New Wave of Traditional Heavy Metal website also draws comparison in Alex's vocals to Sebastian Bach, which I can hear as well. The dude has a really powerful voice, and the website also suggests that some of these tracks sound like they could be B-sides to singles from Slave to the Grind, which is certainly not a bad thing either. It's a tremendous debut album. Not surprising given the level of experience from the members of the band. They all have been around quite a while. If you like old Queensryche meets Skid Row, I think this is definitely something you want to take a listen to. It's probably one of my favorite albums up to this point this year. Standout tracks on it include Disconnected, Curse of the Street, So Cold It Burns, Outburst of Rage, and the track that I picked to listen to tonight, Titan Glory.
Let's check this out. This is Vigilhunter, their debut album, and it is a self-titled album. This is the third track off of that album, Titan Glory. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Again, when you hear bands like this, you just think, why isn't there a place for this type of music on the radio? Why is there not a place for this? Because again, it has a throwback feel, but it doesn't feel dated. It, like you said, a lot of the comparisons that you listed are pretty apt, and you can hear them there. It's just great classic sounding metal music that has a modern home with a band that still wants to play music that sounds like that.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like early Queensryche, like maybe like Warning era, maybe Rage for Order, but probably with a little more pop sensibility, like a Skid Row. So you kind of get music that feels like it might fit a little more on the radio than some of the early Queensryche, which might have had a little higher barrier of entry. But yeah, it's great stuff, and people need to hear it. People need to be shown this music.
For sure. That's what we're here to do. Really great stuff from Vigilhunter. Definitely check that out. Really good release this week is Mike's first pick. As always, you have two picks each and every week. What do you have for pick number 2?
Yeah, so something that I don't do all that often. I'm headed back to the United States. We are in Levittown, New York for this one. This is the third full-length studio album from a symphonic and melodic metal band. The band is called Severed Angel, and the album is When Eternity Ends.
Yeah, it's another one of those that I marked for a re-listen, and then you picked them, and that was good because they need to be featured. What I've heard from these guys already, really, really enjoy this album.
Yeah, this one's pretty wild because there's so much kind of variety in the album where if you just listen to one song, and I recommended that song, you may not really get a full picture of what these guys sound like. The band's been around since 2022, which is pretty impressive that this is their third album. They've released one in 23, 24, and now 25. They are made up of George Dimitri on bass, Wayne Noon on drums, Lou Mavs on guitars and vocals, Mark Muchnick on keyboards, and Alex Rapetti also on vocals and guitars. Yeah, I haven't listened to the first two albums, but if they're anything like When Eternity Ends, these guys must really put in the work because their sound doesn't feel like something you can just go into a studio one day and knock out really fast. There's a lot going on, and I don't know how you knockout albums at the pace they're going. It's really impressive. I mentioned the album having some variety. Through the Eyes of Time feels kind of soaring and epic, just really over the top metal. Then you have Cry Out to the World, feels more grounded, melodic, but maybe more emotive. Then you get into Shed, which takes the heaviness to a different level with more aggressive vocals that kind of have a Dave Mustaine feel to them, which one of the two vocalists clearly kind of has that going on, and you can hear it in some of the tracks. Like Lightning, even more aggressive. Then you have Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, which starts out more like an 80s synthwave song meets heavy metal, so that's another kind of wrinkle that they throw at you. Really cool stuff. If you just listened to Through the Eyes of Time and expected the rest of the album to sound like that, you'd be shocked. Probably in a good way, but I guess that's kind of up to the individual listener. I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot going on, and I was never bored listening to any of this. Standout tracks include Through the Eyes of Time, Cry Out to the World, Like Lightning, The Demon's Alive, When Eternity Ends, and the track that I picked, the one I mentioned just a bit ago, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing.
Yeah, let's check these guys out. Really good stuff from Severed Angel, When Eternity Ends. This is the 6th track off of this album, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
They create without the funds, fill the gap with their positivity. Wolf in sheep's clothing has entered the room. If you don't pay attention, they'll all be consumed. The masses want entertainment just to be amused. Feel-good stories, all they need, the rest I'll assume. That sheep is so amazing, better than the rest.
Yeah, I mean, that is melodic metal at its finest right there. Just really enjoyable. But again, so often we choose some of these melodic bands, and I'm going to get to a couple of them in a moment. Like, you do hear that metal edge to it. It's not just over the top, just so far out there that you kind of lose the metal part of it. But these guys seem to still be able to hold on to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that this song sounds that way, but it doesn't sound like Through the Eyes of Time, and it certainly doesn't sound like Lightning. I think if you're going to check these guys out, you need to grab a couple songs and really get a feel for what the overall sounds like. I think it's awesome because, again, you don't get bored. One song doesn't feel like a copy-paste job of the last one. It's just kind of all over the place, and I think it creates a really cool listening experience from front to back.
Yeah, excited to go back and listen to this one front to back, but really good stuff from what I've heard so far from Severed Angel. Really great release this week. Mike's second pick of this week on March 28th. I have done one thing that I don't typically do, which is pick 2 Frontiers bands, but this was a week where we had 4 of them, I believe, had albums released, and the other 2 are really good as well, but ended up just going with the 2 that I thought maybe stood out a little bit above the other 2 releases, and we'll get started with the first one. This is a melodic rock AOR band from Sweden. It is Ginevra with the album Beyond Tomorrow, and again, both of these albums are just really, really good. This is their second full-length album. It's comprised of vocalist Christian Fear, formerly of Seventh Crystal, guitarist Magnus Carlsen, who makes many appearances on Frontiers albums, bassist Jimmy J from Heat, and drummer Magnus Ulfstedt, ex-Eclipse and Nordic Union member. Frontiers kind of labels this Nordic melodic rock. To me, I mean, it feels very much just like polished AOR rock. I mean, not disputing that they are from the Nordic area, so
whatever they do is going to be Nordic.
It's going to be Nordic, but I think it's just a really great AOR melodic metal album. The theme of the album, according to the band, covers a higher cause without getting religious or political. Basically, the message is you only have so long on Earth, so make the most of it. I think that's a pretty safe message and one that everybody can resonate with. It's AOR rock, but it definitely is on the rock portion of the spectrum. While the vocals are very melodic, the guitars are hard rock all the way, and it's just got a great balance the way it all works together. This is just one of the best albums I've heard of the year. Definitely, as I'm looking at year-end stuff, you'd have to think this one's going to be in contention along with my second pick today. But really great stuff from these guys. Standout tracks include True North, Beat the Devil, Let Freedom Ring, and the track we're going to check out on the podcast is Moonlight. So let's check these guys out. Ginevra with their second album, Beyond Tomorrow. This is the opening track off of that album, Moonlight. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. I mean, some serious range on vocals, which definitely, again, just kind of gives you that metal edge along with the guitars and the drums and the bass and everything else going on there. But, both of my albums this week, it's like, well, what kind of music do you like that we talk about on the podcast? And it's like, well, these two albums are a pretty good place to start. But really, really enjoyed this one front to back. It was a really good listen. Mike, your thoughts on Ginevra?
My first thought hearing it, and not the band, but the name, was, is that some sort of like evolved Pokemon from Jafria? Is that like the next form of it?
Maybe.
I wasn't sure about that, but yeah, it's kind of what I expected to hear when you told me Magnus Carlsen's involved in it, because it kind of feels like the unreleased Alan Land album with new band and vocals. I'd love to see what kind of role he played in the songwriting, because I imagine just knowing what he's capable of, he's probably had a pretty big hand in the creation of this album, and that's not a bad thing. The guy's great, and this sounds great.
Yeah, I believe he wrote the album, if I remember reading correctly. But again, not shocking. The dude is incredibly talented, and certainly as far as like, there are a few guys we talk about constantly when we talk about Frontiers bands, and he's one of them that shows up in so many places. And the reason is the dude knows how to write catchy songs that also rock, and why would you not want to get him involved in your process if you're looking for something that's just really, really good? So definitely check those guys out. Ginevra, my first pick for this week. We are on to pick number 2, and we're going with more veteran guys for pick number 2. And again, this is just an outstanding album. A melodic rock band that is mostly from Sweden, outside of one of their singers. It is W.E.T, W-E-T, with those actually stand for something, which we'll explain in a moment. And the album is Apex. They were formed in 2009. This is their 5th full-length album. The band members include the one non-Swedish guy, vocalist Jeff Scott Soto, who, of course, we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Eric Martinson, whose name will come up again here in a little bit. Robert Saul on guitars and keyboards. Magnus Hendrickson on guitars. Andreas Passmark on bass. And Jamie Borger on drums. The band name comes from all of the band members' previous bands. Saul and Passmark were with Work of Art, that's the W. Martinson and Hendrickson from Eclipse, the E, and Soto and Borger from Talisman, which is T. And I say former bands. A lot of the cases, these are current bands because this is a side project. They get together occasionally and they just release a new album of stuff, and it's just amazing. It's just about as good as you can do AOR rock. If there was some sort of AOR award show, which maybe we should start, this would be right up there along with the first pick tonight for album of the year. Again, these guys get together, and when they do, they just seem really motivated to produce something really amazing. It's got a great classic rock sound, but again, with a modern touch. It's the Frontiers formula, but again, you get these guys together that they clearly have a lot of industry experience. They've been around for a long time. Jeff Scott Soto has been doing it forever. Eric Martinson is continuing to do it at a high level, and the rest of the band as well. And you're just going to get something that sounds really amazing, and this is another one of those albums that I really enjoyed all the way through, and will probably listen to again just while I'm working during the day. But just really great stuff from these guys. Standout tracks include This House Is on Fire, What Are We Fighting For, Where Are the Heroes Now, and the track we're going to listen to on the podcast is Believer. So let's check out W.E.T with their new release, Apex. This is the opening track off of that album, Believer. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, it brings up a point, and I'll kind of leave this out there and throw it to you for your thoughts on this. Like, I don't know if there's a handful of metal vocalists over the years that are, for whatever reason, underrated, despite the fact they've been in the industry for so long. And Jeff Scott Soto's got to be darn near the top of that list as far as guys that just for whatever reason, I think the metal people respect him, but I feel like music-wise, when you start hearing people list the top vocalist of metal and melodic rock over the last 4 decades, his name doesn't always come up, and it's crazy because the dude, even now, still sounds amazing and still can produce vocals that sound like this. It's just almost criminal that he doesn't get more respect.
Sometimes I forget just how long the guy's been around. It's like he was singing with Yngwie Malmsteen back in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
Like, he did vocals on tracks like I'll See the Light Tonight, which is tremendous. And then in the 90s, you had him singing for Axel Rudy Pell, which they had great albums together. 1996's Black Moon Pyramid, great album. He also did the vocals for the movie Rockstar back in 2001, which is an underrated movie for what it was. Basically a dramatization of the Judas Priest, Tim Ripper Owens story, only with Mark Wahlberg and Steel Dragon. But really cool thing. And obviously, Jeff Scott Soto is amazing. Eclipse, they're another great band too. Their last album from last year, Megalomanium 2, was a great album. Again, to the layperson that just likes hard rock, they don't know about this stuff.
Yeah.
At least not to the degree they should. I mean, I'm sure Eddie Trunk has screamed about Jeff Scott Soto in the past because that's got to be right up his alley too. But
Yeah.
still, it blows your mind how a band like Eclipse, they've been releasing studio albums since 2001. Like, why aren't they a household name for people?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. And I'm sure the other bands I mentioned too are equally great.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, again, you hear when these guys get together, they can produce something that just is this amazing. And, they'll get together, record an album, and they go off and do their own things in the bands I mentioned. And, then they get back together and do this kind of stuff.
And the funny thing is, like, if you're a fan of metal in general, even if you haven't sought out Talisman or Axel Rudy Pell or Malmsteen, it's like, it's still very possible that your favorite artist has worked with Jeff Scott Soto. Like, he's had a side project with David Ellefson. He works fairly regularly with Jason Bieler.
Yeah.
Like, they're just buddies, and they tour together sometimes. So, like, the dude's out there. He's all over the place, and more people need to listen to his studio work.
I think without getting too far down this road, because obviously we could derail this conversation for 20 more minutes, but I think it's guys like him that make what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has become so criminal. Because there's so many big-name rock acts that are still not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that a guy like Jeff Scott Soto should be a Hall of Famer with the career he's had.
Just
and
look
the
at
work.
his credits on Wikipedia, and it's comical.
And he'll probably never get in, or it'll be just some sort of, after he's passed away years later, just some sort of like posthumous induction. That's a guy that should be a Hall of Famer, and there should be, when you say a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, those are the kind of guys we should be looking to honor. And again, no offense to anybody else who gets in, but Jeff Scott Soto is a first ballot Hall of Famer in my book with everything he's done.
I think if you just looked at his work in as far as like backing vocals and guest appearances, not dissimilar to like the numerous amounts of studio musicians and session musicians who have played huge roles in some of your favorite albums. Like, I think if there isn't, there needs to be consideration for kind of that wing of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Like, I get the feeling, like, if you were to ask some of the major acts, like, who are some of their favorite musicians, there are probably a lot of them you don't know about because they're kind of just session guys.
Yeah, and the only time you hear about them is if they have to fill in on a tour or they
Yeah.
fill in on an album or eventually one of them gets in a band or we find out there's a side project from one of these guys, Again, that's my favorite thing about this podcast is giving a chance to spotlight not just guys like Jeff Scott Soto, but like Mike said, guys that are record producers, they just do masterers, people that master albums that are so amazingly talented. Like they're as much a part of it as the guys that are out in front of the tour and everything else.
Well, that's what you see when you start talking more and more about different albums every week, is you start seeing all of the recurring names. It's really impressive.
Yeah, and Frontiers has lined a lot of these guys up, and obviously we'll talk about another Frontiers band, and obviously we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about Eric Martinson in a moment when we get into the vault, but it is that time to get into the vault. And again, check out the music from March 28th. There's a lot of really great stuff this week. Encourage you to check out the playlist and find some picks of your own. It is time to get into the vault, where we will each tell you a classic album that you should check out. Mike, again, is literally going through his vault and going letter by letter, and we are up to the letter G. And I think anybody who's listened to this podcast for 61 weeks, first off, if you've listened to all 61 episodes or 60 episodes and this one being 61, we want to hear from you. We want to know.
Reach out to us.
Yeah, we definitely want to know what you think because, I mean, if you're still coming back, we're doing something right, but please let us know. But secondly, obviously, this is a band that you picked this week that's not going to surprise too many people, albeit I'm sure there were other options for this letter. But you've kind of gone, with a heavy hitter here this week. What do you got for us in the vault?
Yeah, honestly, I had to go back through my records because I was certain that I'd already talked about this album. And maybe I did when you were doing your yearly thing and we got to 2006.
Sure.
Or I probably did before we started doing the weekly format. Because, going through the vault the first time around, I definitely picked a Gamma Ray album. So
great choice as well.
Great album. But that being said, we're obviously now in the letter G. That is where I am. And I had some options. I was kind of torn between this and one other one. The other one would probably be a bit more divisive as far as how people received it when it came out, given it took so long to be released. But I thought it deserved maybe some mention because it was, I think, good despite all that. But no, I didn't go that direction.
Fair enough.
Instead, I went with the 10th studio album from the metal band that really you can't compare to very many other metal bands. They are from Richmond, Virginia, kind of, but we all know they're from outer space, and they set up shop in Antarctica, where they basically created everything. The band is GWAR, and this is their 2006 album, Beyond Hell.
I think before we get into this album, the strangest thing about GWAR, and that's a big statement because there are certainly a lot of strange things about this really talented band, is the fact that they seem to be showing up everywhere these days. We saw them in an anime video on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are clearly out there. They take their stuff seriously without taking themselves seriously, and I think that's how you get to this kind of success. But obviously, beyond all the other stuff is the music, which is kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think that's a great marriage as far as tying themselves to people talking anime, because now that anime has become so much more mainstream, GWAR is essentially heavy metal anime.
Yeah.
Like the way they have the most ridiculous lore and characters. Like, to me, there would be a huge crossover if anime fans picked up Scumdogs of the Universe. They would likely enjoy it. And maybe they've realized that, and they want to try to get their name out there a little more, which I certainly wouldn't blame them for it. But yeah, going back to this, Beyond Hell, it's a concept album, basically chronicling GWAR having their fortress in Antarctica attacked by the forces of humanity and forcing them to retreat to the underground, where they then ultimately battle the forces of hell to take it over before triumphantly returning to Earth. Some of the foes they encounter along the way include the Pig, a cop who serves as Hell's policeman, the Tormentor, who is some sort of demon who in past tours has actually been portrayed by Devin Townsend, who I found out later, I didn't realize this at the time, or maybe I did and didn't think about it. He actually produced the album, which is awesome because he's kind of a genius in the metal field.
Yeah.
The Ultimate Bohab, who is GWAR's biggest fan of all time, who killed himself to join them in hell. And ultimately, the devil himself. They fight him too. If you go to Wikipedia and just look at the character list for the album, it's There's some I wouldn't even want to mention on air, but they're hilarious and ridiculous, as you would expect from GWAR. But beyond that, the album itself and the songs are amazing. And to me, this album contains some of the best metal work that they've done throughout their entire career. Um, GWAR has always kind of had a bit of silliness around them, but it kind of felt like in 2001 when they released Violence Has Arrived, they kind of leaned a little heavier back into the heavy metal side of things. And kind of that string of albums since then. You had 2001's Violence Has Arrived, you had War Party, then 2006 Beyond Hell, Lust in Space, and then finally Bloody Pit of Horror. That stretch of albums from like 2001 to 2010 to me is kind of some of their best work, where it felt like they were kind of reestablishing the fact that they could play and that they were a metal band to, despite the subject matter, be taken seriously. Standout tracks on the album include War Is All We Know, Murderer's Muse, Go to Hell, Tormentor, The Ultimate Bohab, and Back in Crack. Yeah, it's a great album. I think outside of maybe Scumdogs of the Universe, if I was to recommend one GWAR album to somebody to say, hey, check these guys out, it would probably be this album.
Interesting that they also recorded some of it at Devin Townsend Studios in Vancouver. So not only was he involved with the production side, but he literally brought the band to Vancouver to do at least some of the album there. Also did some in Virginia. But again, I mean, this is a band that has found a niche over the years that they've been able to kind of stick with and find a lot of success. And I think that was important probably for them to thrive in an era where rock music was de-emphasized, because having a gimmick to go with the fact that they can play music and they're talented, because the gimmick without the music doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just they're a band you see at the local pub down the road. Like, they're not a worldwide success. But I think the gimmick was important because I think it got them out in front of people at a time where, again, rock acts just didn't. Like, unless you were playing, new metal or something like that, you weren't even making it on the radio. And these guys, maybe without the radio airplay, found a way to find their fans by creating these characters and the stories and these albums that had concepts. And then, you bring them in with that and you keep them because the music rocks. And that's kind of how it has to be, that balance. And they've always kind of found that balance over the years.
Yeah, they definitely existed in a period of time where the last thing you wanted to do was try to act serious and play the kind of rock music they played. Like, I feel like the characters probably gave them that sense of, oh, we're just here for the show. We don't care about the music. That's not a big deal. We just, it's not that we like this music. It's we like the characters. We like the blood. We like the ridiculousness. But yeah, I just forever underrated because of the characters and the antics, but this album and the band in general is just an all-time classic for me.
And the gimmick and everything probably separated them from so many other bands we've seen on this podcast that have been like, we read, oh, they've been around since 1998. This is the first time we've ever heard of them. This is the first album. It's like they've been doing on the same career path, but because they were just playing straight up music. And not to say their stuff wasn't really good too all that time, but again, GWAR was able to brand themselves in a way that they got them out in front of rock fans, put on live shows that were memorable, and then again, produce great music, because it has to be all of that. And they're still at it all these years later and still producing great music, even with obviously, some forced lineup changes.
Certainly.
But, again, definitely, one of those bands that has found a way to just keep doing it at a high level for so many years.
They've always felt like a band who, from day one, said, we're just going to do what we want to do, and if people enjoy it, that's great. If not, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think over time, that continues to pay off for them.
I think generally in anything you do in life, and even if it's creative, like if you kind of have that mindset, I mean, obviously you do understand that if you go way too far out there, maybe people won't enjoy it and you won't. But if you're enjoying it, it's going to sound like you enjoy it, and that's going to make fans enjoy it. And to me, like if I gave advice about starting a podcast, it would be that same sort of thing. Like you enjoy it, and hopefully that'll come across and people will enjoy it. Yeah.
If you don't enjoy talking about something for hours, then it's certainly not going to be enjoyable for anyone to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. So to me, that I think they've kind of nailed that mindset, and it's why they've continued to be successful. But this again from 2006,
Great album.
Beyond Hell from GWAR, Mike's pick in the vault this week. Of course, I picked two bands from Frontiers as my main picks, but again, we are going through the Frontiers bands through the vault in my picks, and this is our randomizer week. Basically, we're spending 2 weeks on each letter. 1 week, I pick a band and an album that has to be a Frontiers release, and then the next week, I leave it to a randomizer to pick a band, and then I'll pick a Frontiers album. And we're picking a band that actually had an album released last year on Frontiers, but that's not the album we chose in this case. We are going to be talking about the band Brazen Abbot and their release, which again, it was one of those things that the release was hard to find, as I have that pulled up here. My Resurrection from 2005. They, for whatever reason, don't have a Facebook page as far as I could find. The album itself was not on YouTube Music, which is crazy. So I actually found a YouTube video that had their entire album on there, which is how I ended up watching it. This is an interesting album because we have 4 lead singers on this album, and it's some of our favorite names from Frontiers, including Jolyn Turner, Tony Hartnell, Goran Edman, and Eric Martinson coming back again.
Well, why not?
Well, why not? The rest of the band is Nikola Kotsev, who's kind of the brains behind the band, on percussion and keyboards, Wayne Banks on bass, Matthias Nutzis on drums, and Nelko Kolarov on keys, and the conductor of the Sofia Strings Symphonic Orchestra. So definitely something wild there with them bringing the orchestra in. Obviously, the one advantage this album has when you have 4 lead singers is that there's no 2 tracks that really sound the same. Obviously, the tracks that the singers do have some similarity, but each song is basically a new singer, and then they have a stretch from track 8 to 10 where that's when they bring in Eric Martinson. He sings 3 songs in a row, but for the first 7 songs, they alternate singers, and because of that, every track feels different. But it's just a great melodic rock album. Again, they have such variety on here. You have some songs that are definitely more toward the melodic ballady side, and then you have some other songs that are definitely toward the rock side. Like you said, these guys still releasing music through Frontiers. They released Eye of the Storm last December. But this was for a randomized pick. These guys are great. A lot of great talent in this band. And hopefully they'll keep releasing music because I would definitely love to hear more of it. Standout tracks on this album include Godforsaken, Dreams, More Than Money, and Rage of Angels. Again, you just can't go wrong with these I don't want to say super groups, but it really is a super group.
Ensemble-y for sure.
Yeah, they bring these guys in and they just put on these amazing albums, and it's just really great stuff. And there was one fact I wanted to check because I just said it, and I had to bring up the album one more time to do that because, again, it's hard to find information on these guys. But Nikola Kotsev is basically the creator of the band, and again, just an incredible amount of talent, which is not a terrible surprise with Frontiers. And Jolyn Turner is another vocalist that is probably criminally underrated, very much in the same way as Jeff Scott Soto. But definitely an album worth checking out. If you're looking for a random Frontiers album, you can't really go wrong. You just might have a hard time finding it, which, like I said, I had to go to YouTube to eventually find it. But any quick thoughts on these guys, just even in general about these ensemble pieces?
Kind of talking about Jolyn Turner some more. I feel like he and Jeff Scott Soto are kind of interchangeable as far as if you need a top-tier singer for your band, yet they don't end up getting the same kind of billing that other lead singers from the band might have gotten in the past. I mean, Jolyn Turner spent time in the band Rainbow. He sang on songs like I Surrender, Stone Cold, Street of Dreams, but clearly was never maybe revered in the public eye to the same degree as other Rainbow singers of the past.
Yeah.
He sang for Yngwie Malmsteen as well on a couple of the other really huge Malmsteen tracks. Hold On, Heaven Tonight. So whether you get him or Jeff Scott Soto, you're getting something really awesome. The man's also obviously had a solo career. He's done a lot of guest appearances as well. Taking a look at his Wikipedia, he did backing tracks for Don Johnson, which is pretty awesome. Michael Bolton, Cher, John Waite, Bonnie Tyler, Paul Carrick, Billy Joel. The guy has clearly put in a lot of work over the years, and I mean, how do you not bring him in? The dude's got a tremendous voice.
The last guest album that he was on was with, according to his Wikipedia, which again is not completely accurate because we do know he was with Brazen Abbot in 2024, but he was involved with Michael Schenker Group. He's been involved in a band called Come Taste the Band. I don't know what that is, the Jan Holberg Project. The Sunstorm, who we've talked about on this podcast before. Yeah, I mean, the dude's incredibly talented, and you know that not just because of all the amazing metal bands he's been with. Like you said, some of the biggest pop acts in the world brought this guy in to do backing vocals. That tells you a lot about it probably tells you he's a pretty easy guy to work with.
Yeah.
That, those guys, they don't fool around. They want people that can come in and do the job and be done with it, but also he's incredibly talented, and this album was incredibly fun to listen to. Again, Frontiers really does very little wrong as far as melodic rock. And again, so many different varieties on this album and just an incredible amount of talent in this band.
Yeah, I also didn't mention that he performed on Avantasia's 2013 The Mystery of Time, as well as Magnus Carlsen's Freefall Kingdom of Rock in 2015. So now you got the connection to Magnus Carlsen as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, just incredible.
Dude stays busy.
Yeah, for sure. And Eric Martinson doesn't appear to have a Wikipedia page, but obviously he's a dude that's staying busy as well. We mentioned him twice on the podcast, but another guy that has an incredible amount of talent. But just fun stuff from those guys. Definitely check those ads out. We got the letter C coming up next week. I've not yet picked the band, but I'm sure there'll be some great choices. We'll get to that next week. It is time to wrap up our podcast with the Power Trio. That is when we go through and we will pick a question. And we're looking for a top 3 something in the Power Trio.
This was a tough one.
This was a tough one because I think the tough part for me was trying to define the question.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, which I think will make for a wide variety of answers. And the Power Trio this week, as suggested by Chris, was the top 3 guilty pleasure bands. And I think when you look to define this, I think there's a couple different ways. If you're just a hardcore metal guy and you only listen to metal and you've got some pop bands on your iPod or something, that might be a guilty pleasure band. If you're someone that likes a lot of music, maybe it's just a band that you might not be the proudest if it played in public. Like,
it's kind of a weird combination of those emotions, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got 3. Mike, do we have any guest picks this week?
I did get some picks from Shane, actually.
All right, cool. I always like to hear Shane's opinion, so let's hear his picks.
It's interesting. I posed the question to him, and what he came back with, I then gave him my 3, and he's like, those really aren't. I don't know if those are necessarily guilty pleasures, and I explained to him my mindset as far as someone who's a metal fan. If I'm like with other metal fans and one of these songs come up, I might feel a bit bad about that, and that's kind of where the guilty pleasure aspect comes in. But Shane's picks, not surprising based on statements he's made prior. Number 1, Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Fair enough. Number 2, No Doubt.
Man, that's not a bad pick. I like No Doubt. Certainly their big hits of their first couple albums. If Spiderwebs comes on the radio, I will listen to it and sing along with it.
It is a classic.
It is.
But I can kind of see it, especially later on in their career, I think. If it was something off Tragic Kingdom, I think you get a pass.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I could definitely see later stuff. And finally, he kind of he gave me one pick, and then he gave me a 4th, almost like, hey, maybe replace that one. I don't know, though, but I'm going to give you both of them.
All right, fair enough.
His initial number 3 was Bonnie Tyler.
That thought crossed my mind at some point during this process.
And kind of fitting what he ended up potentially replacing it or adding to it with Lady Gaga.
Okay. I mean, kind of the same vibe, different eras, obviously, but Lady Gaga's got some really catchy songs. There's no question about it. And Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart, is one of the best songs of the 80s. Like, it's just, there's so much
Holding
going
Out
on.
for a Hero, great as well.
For sure. Incredible talent.
Yeah, for sure.
Great picks. He gets our 4-person power trio. But we'll give him a pass. We give Shane, but we appreciate Shane.
It's kind of like when Pat Smear kind of showed up in Nirvana for a short period of time. Like, is he in the band? Is he not in the band? It's kind of like that.
He's kind of the same things happen with Foo Fighters as well.
Basically, yeah.
So good stuff there. But okay, well, let's get to your picks. We'll see again at some point during this podcast. You and I are going to pick the same bands because it's just we have so much similar history, if not the same taste. Our tastes are a little different, but generally, we have listened to the same bands over the years. So what do you have for your picks?
So one way to kind of differentiate my picks, I think, from other people is that I went through my actual music collection and said, okay, what do I own
That's
that
fair.
like I would consider to be more of a guilty pleasure than, I'm not going to list like something from Metallica or Megadeth. Those are obviously kind of in my wheelhouse. But
Yeah.
As far as stuff that I own CDs of that I'm like, in certain company, you wouldn't want to rock out to it. And number one for that would be Air Supply.
Yeah, they were certainly in the front of my mind at some point. That last sentence, it just made me think of another one. I may have to either replace one of mine. But anyway, yeah. Air Supply is amazing.
Absolutely great. Not cool at all, but man, they sing great. They write great songs. Very, very soft rock, like almost too soft to even be yacht rock.
Yeah,
Like,
they're definitely on the borderline of yacht rock.
but still, I mean, you can't deny the talent.
Incredible talent, incredible music.
Number two, I was thinking like of the music that I could have been listening to in 1995. You think of like who the popular bands were, and there were a lot of really big name bands that were kind of hitting their stride or continuing on, like a Pantera. But I think in 1995, one of the first CDs I bought was The Presidents of the United States of America.
Yeah, that's a great album. Like, I mean, again, and that's where it's like, depending on your definition of like guilty pleasure, because to me, I would tell everybody I own that album, but
To me, I love it, but it's terrible.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm okay with that, but like, it is what it is.
It is.
I love it, and I think the songs are super enjoyable, but like,
yeah.
what can you say? Like that was what I was listening to. I was that cool. And number three, I'm not a big rap metal or nu metal guy necessarily, but for some reason when this album came out, a couple of the songs that were playing on the radio I thought were super catchy, and that's Hollywood Undead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned them on the podcast before.
Yeah, they're very much like metal meets like Eminem, and it's not all good, but it's a thing. It's again, it's catchy. It's not something that I'm like, hey, this is the greatest thing in the world. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it that I hear it. It's like, hey, yeah, that song, like Number 5 or Undead or Sell Your Soul. It's cheesy, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, those are fair picks for sure. One that I added to my list, which we'll just consider an honorable mention, based on the criteria you mentioned for the first, which is basically an album you own that would certainly, you bought it, but I don't know if I would be proud of it.
Yeah.
Was Len. Can't Stop the Bum Rush, because Steal My Sunshine came out and it was catchy and I really enjoyed it. And then I bought the album and the rest of the album sounds nothing like that song. I was so disappointed.
I mean, that's right up there with the Macarena as far as like,
I own that too.
This is your only contribution to music.
I own the Macarena
Like,
as well.
you have that one song and you're not going to give us anything else. And that's fine, but let's make sure we understand that.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. So, but I will just say that as an honorable mention. The three I picked, I started with Milli Vanilli. Like, you can say what you want about those two guys.
I own that album.
There you go. Like, that album is good, and the music is good. Whoever sang it.
Here's the thing about Milli Vanilli. Once upon a time, they helped Mario and Luigi save the princess from Koopa. Or no, it was the other way around. Mario and Luigi had to save Milli Vanilli because Koopa kidnapped them to perform for Wendy or whatever.
Yeah, on her birthday or something.
Yeah, only it wasn't Wendy because they didn't use the real names for whatever reason. I guess I don't know. I don't know what happened with that cartoon, but yeah. And originally they used the Milli Vanilli music, but by the time it actually came to DVD, they did not use the Milli Vanilli music, which really ruined it for me. But yeah, Milli Vanilli was great. I don't care who was singing.
That's exactly it. Number 2 is a band I've mentioned before, but again, pop band, so maybe not the coolest. Wilson Phillips, like, they're really talented. They got a couple albums there that were just really, really good. Definitely on the pop side. Definitely would be a girl group today if you were like they were coming out today. But obviously, an incredible amount of talent.
I guess my question about that would be, what's more respectable or what's more reasonable, like Wilson Phillips as guilty pleasure or something like a Tiffany or Debbie Gibson?
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I liked hits from both of them, but I don't know that I would say that I I don't know if I liked either one of them enough. Like Debbie Gibson maybe would be.
I just feel like they're more possibly like qualifying for guilty
Yeah.
pleasure, whereas like Wilson Phillips almost is like
They're too good.
female vocal ensemble group
Yeah,
or something like
maybe.
that, like a female Boys to Men perhaps.
Yeah. I feel like they don't get the respect that a Boys to Men gets.
No, absolutely not.
But yeah, so and it's funny you mentioned Yacht Rock because the last name that came to mind was Christopher Cross. Like again, maybe not one you'd be proud to tell a bunch of people about, but man, he's got some absolute banger songs that are Yacht Rock.
Absolutely.
He is Yacht Rock to me. If I have to tell somebody what Yacht Rock is, like Christopher Cross, like Sailing and just he's just incredibly talented. I know you're looking it up right now.
What was I looking? What band was it? His name came up like a week or two ago,
Yeah.
right? Where he like was a guest player,
Yeah.
for some band for like one night.
Arthur's Theme.
But I can't remember who it was he played with.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was. I remember talking about it, but
I don't know if it's actually on his Wikipedia either, which is unfortunate.
but yeah, I mean, obviously, not something that
Arthur's Theme's great.
It is. That is a great song. And I'm sure, and I didn't look at his Wikipedia page, but I would guess he's another guy that has probably been involved with the production of a lot of other albums. We'll check that out here on the podcast before we wrap this up. You know, he's another dude that has been around for a long time, and but yeah, his first album, Christopher Cross, came out, hit number 6 on the U.S. charts. Another Page hit number 11, and then didn't really have a ton of big hits after that. He also had the General Hospital theme, which is interesting. Ride Like the Wind. That's another one that maybe doesn't get the same attention, but that's a great song. Sailing, obviously, Never Be the Same. All Right. Arthur's Theme, as Mike mentioned. And then, kind of dropped off after that, unfortunately, but has been involved with some other Alan Parsons, Alabama, Michael McDonald, David Lee Roth did background vocals for California Girls.
Well, why not?
Why not? Like, and his early stuff won a ton of awards. He won an Academy Award in 1981 for Best Original Song for Arthur's Theme. Also won a Golden Globe for that song. Won 5 Grammys. 1 for Album of the Year for Christopher Cross. 2 for Sailing, Record of the Year and Song of the Year, and also 1 for Best Arrangement Accompanying Vocalist. Just really, really talented dude. But again, maybe not one that you want to tell your metal fans that you're listening to on your iPod.
And that's a shame.
It is, for sure.
But no, I totally agree.
But yeah, there's the Power Trio. We'll have a new question next week. Of course, you can always join our Discord. You can leave comments on our YouTube video about what your guilty pleasure bands might be. We definitely like to know, so definitely pass those along to us. But that is going to bring this podcast to a close for another Sunday evening. Great to have you along with us once again. Don't forget to join us in a little over 12 hours' time for the Nerdcast News Report. We'll be talking all things SakaiCon coming up at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday morning. Make sure you join us then. And then again next weekend, we'll be with you Saturday morning for a WrestleMania preview on the Nerdcast News Report. And sometime next weekend, we'll also have another episode of the Hard Rock Empire with the music of April the 4th. A big thanks to Mike for all of his work putting this together. A big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. And a big thanks to you whenever and wherever you're listening. We really appreciate it. We'll join you again tomorrow morning for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.